Hello, it's Amy, and I'm back once again with the Journal of Emily Shore. This is the diary of a teenage girl in the 1830s, published initially in 1891 after her death. And we are on page 127 today in the year 1835, and we are looking at the entry for October 20th. 1835, which was a Tuesday. At tea, the conversation happened to turn on the subject of gypsies, who, it was incidentally mentioned in the Quarterly Review, are indisputably proved to have originally come from India. Papa was not aware that had been so certainly proved, but he remembered many facts which make it very probable, and yet alone not at all certain. Their language is the circumstance on which the supposition chiefly rests. Papa's uncle, the late Lord Teignmouth, was convinced they come from India. He once made two gypsies tell him what words in their language they used to express several English words. These he took down as they spoke them, and at the same time employed his daughters to write them as they seemed to be spelt, according to the manner in which the gypsies pronounced them to their ears. And when the words were afterward examined, Lord T found that 2/3 were either pure Hindostani or a dialect of it. But even with these facts, Papa says, are by no means conclusive, seeing that some of the Eastern languages are found to bear so close a resemblance to those of Europe that the Greek and Sanskrit are considered to be little more than dialects of the same language. October 22nd, Thursday. We have been in great apprehension of Jack's life. He has been dull and sorrowful and shrinking from notice ever since the clipping of his wings, and has taken up his abode around the greenhouse. On Tuesday, as Mamma and I were looking at him, he suddenly fell into fits, tumbled down, rolled about, flapped his wings, and struggled in agonies of pain. He remained a long time in this state. We gave him 2 pills of Morrison's, on which he became literally sick, but still remained panting and convulsed to the end of the day. Yesterday morning we were surprised to find him as well as ever, but he had another and severer fit in the afternoon. We brought him in a basket of hay into the hall, and there he lay in great suffering, breathing with a frightful noise, so that we fully expected his death. We gave him another pill, and this morning he was again convalescent, and in no time had quite recovered, except that he remains very low-spirited. Papa was very much vexed at the clipping of Jack's wings, and has never been near him since, not liking to see him unhappy. And I think Jack misses him. However, Papa came to see him last night, and also this morning, and caressed him to cheer and comfort him. I cannot imagine what was the matter with Jack. His illness had much the appearance of poison. I do not know whether he can now be suffering from the effects of some sips of Gouliard which he took a fortnight ago, when he came into Mr. Ashton's room. Well, I would suspect the bird is ill from having its wings clipped. Whether, it's the result of a shock to the body from having the wings clipped and being unable to fly, or also a result in, a low mood. It's just really unfortunate, this poor bird. November 3rd, Tuesday. I continue writing my tale of Devereux whenever I can find time, of which I spend but little in it. I never touch it before 6 o'clock tea, and seldom for more than half an hour, which is generally during the 8 o'clock tea. I have now finished only 3 chapters or 40 pages, or nearly the size of my journal. A great deal of my time is occupied in teaching A.L. and M., whom I instruct together, on the alternate days in Greek. And we have a editor's note here. A picture that lingers in the mind of survivors is that of her bending with her long ringlets over a slate on which she was carefully illustrating some of the complicated laws of Greek grammar and mysteries, and there's some Greek here that I don't understand, with different moods, observing the while in a tone of pleasure. I do think I shall be able to make you understand it. Grecian history and arithmetic. I also teach M by himself geography and French history. The history which he reads to me is Mrs. Markham's, of which I am very fond. For beginners, it is unequaled. It is correct and unprejudiced, and the language is perfectly plain, easy, simple, and elegant. The narrative is made very interesting, and the conversations contain a great deal of curious and useful matter. The Grecian history I use with them is Malkin's. Arithmetic I teach them in the same way in which I learned myself, by explaining the principles and reason of every operation. November 7, Saturday. I am convinced that geography and history are among the most useful and interesting of studies. Besides what I study myself, I learn a great deal by my teaching M. It refreshes my memory and confirms my knowledge on these subjects. Those who are not accustomed to teach have no idea the infinite advantage it is to the teacher. November 9, Monday. Papa mentioned a curious circumstance about cats, which he knew of himself, as it happened in his father's house. They had 2 cats, a male and a female, called Chance and Chase. The latter, which was the male, was given away and sent to a house about 2 miles off. Soon after, Chance kittened. The day after, Chance disappeared, leaving her poor kittens to themselves. She was absent 3 days, during which Papa and his sister preserved the kittens alive by pouring milk down their throats. In 3 days, the mother returned with her companion Chase, to find whom she must have passed through water, to which cats are so averse. It is, besides, a wonder how she could have discovered Chase's new abode. On her return, she again suckled her kittens, who all lived. I must also mention here a very curious anecdote of a dog, though I am afraid I cannot altogether vouch for the truth of it. A gentleman fond of animals had a pet dog, which his wife, who hated dogs, detested and banished whenever it entered the drawing room. One day, as she was sitting there, the dog marched in and lay down before the fire. The lady turned him out. The dog, supposing that she was afraid of his dirtying the room, brought a duster from the kitchen, deposited it on the rug, and lay down upon it. The brute of a woman ended by having him kicked out. She told it herself to the person from whom our informant, Miss Noel, Mamma's cousin, heard it, but the lady herself is also an acquaintance of Mamma's. November 10, Tuesday. Some time ago, Mackworth bought a little bottle of nitrous acid, which, on account of an accident which happened with it when he was using it to kill a moth, Mamma caused to be put away. Today he took it into his head to put a pin into the bottle, having before observed that a pin accidentally touching it caused it to bubble. The pin immediately began to dissolve, bubbling, smoking, and hissing. It was quickly destroyed, and the nitrous acid became a beautiful green. This was a common brass pin tinned over. 2 nails of cast iron were next put into the bottle, which were no longer in melting, and finally changed the acid to yellow. Finally, by introducing a little lead, it became black. Spirits of wine made it effrous like a saline draught, and soda and tartaric acid each separately produced the same effect. Sounds like something of a dangerous experiment. December 1st, Tuesday. I long exceedingly to become thoroughly acquainted with every manufacture in England. I read carefully every account of any one which I can light upon, and am much interested by those given by Babbage in his Economy of Manufactures. But alas, we have very few books on this subject, and I doubt whether many exist. Besides, I am very desirous to see all the manufactures with my own eyes, and I should like to travel through Great Britain with that intent. I have seen none except weaving, and the manufacturers in the dockyard at Chatham. It is astonishing how ignorant people are about the method of making the commonest things, and it quite vexes and mortifies me to look round the room and see scarce an article in it of the construction of which I have the least idea. I wish someone would write a book giving a minute account of all the English manufactures. December 5th, Saturday. Mr. Legrice said that a little plant, whose name I had forgotten, has actually a small fibre corresponding to the heart in animals, to and from which juice circulates. This has not been observed in any other vegetable, though it probably exists in all. December 19. Papa began this evening to read to us the history of Protestantism in France. At a pause in the reading, he made remarks to the following purpose. Now we ought not, in reading these things, i.e. the persecution sustained by the French Protestants, to consider of them only in this way. What a horrid church the Roman Catholic must be to allow these things. It is not the Roman Catholic Church, but the spirit of intolerance that then prevailed, that produced it. One great cause of it among the papists was the claim to infallibility of the Church of Rome. A church that claimed to be infallible was likely to be a persecuting one. But the spirit was not confined to the Catholics. We find it also among the Protestants of those days, though they seldom had the power of gratifying it, and perhaps also not so much the will to do it, for the zealous Protestants were more intent on spreading their doctrine than on acquiring a spiritual ascendancy. But it was the same spirit of persecution that made Calvin burn Servetus, and he did not believe in an infallible church. It was the same spirit that made Cranmer burn the Anabaptists, and he did not believe the Church of England to be infallible. We are too apt to consider the Roman Catholics as looking on Protestantism in the same light with ourselves as considering it true, and yet persecuting it. They did not consider it to be true. Those of them who were sincere, and a great part of them were, believed it to be the most abominable heresy that ever was heard of. It is something of the same kind of feeling that we have towards an atheist or a deist. We do not indeed wish to persecute or burn him, but we generally feel a dislike to him. We think that such a man deserves to be punished. Let us imagine what we ourselves should feel if, at the present day, a man was to preach openly the most atrocious, blasphemous, infamous doctrines, and then we shall have some idea of what the Roman Catholics felt towards the Protestants. December 20, Sunday. Mamma, having read to Papa a little sentence out of a book of Bishop Wilson's in her hand, Papa said, "It certainly is not right, and yet somehow a precept of that kind impresses me so much if it comes from a person who, I think, attends to himself. But where we see the reasoning is good, it does not matter who wrote it. It is astonishing how much fallacy there is on this subject. We are going to hear an argumentative speech in the House of Commons. How anxious we are to know the speaker's name. If we are going to hear an argumentative speech, how anxious we are to know the speaker's name. If we are going to read a book, how much impression the name of the author makes on us. And yet it ought to make no difference in our opinion of the reasoning of the book, in matter of testimony, where facts are to be stated. It may make all the difference in the world whether the man is accurate or observing or true, but in matter of reasoning, if that is good, it remains so. Whoever wrote it, it does not signify two straws whether it was written by a clever man or a fool, a rascal, or a Christian." December 21, Monday. A new quarterly review, which came today, contains among the advertisements the prospectus of a splendid French work containing the engravings of ancient and modern coins and medals, of which a specimen is given. Without exaggeration, I think it is exquisitely beautiful. The appearance of being in relief is so perfect that though I am well acquainted with this kind of engraving, I involuntarily drew my finger across it. In my opinion, this is the highest point of perfection to which the art of engraving can attain. I cannot imagine it to be susceptible of improvement. It is described in Babbage's book. December 25th, Friday, Christmas Day. This day I enter on my 17th year. The first birthday which I recorded in a journal was my 11th, and the first, which I distinctly remember, my 5th, since which time 11 years have passed away, and every one more quickly than the former, so that now the last anniversary of this day seems as if it was but yesterday. Very many things which happened to me a long, long time ago I remembered so distinctly that I can hardly realize to myself that 8, 9, 10, or 11 years have passed since then. Everyone finds that succeeding years fly quicker than the former ones, but I have no doubt that the degree in which this seems to happen depends a great deal on the circumstances of a person's being or not being continually employed. I do not remember in all my life, which I recollect as far back as the age of 3, to have been one moment unemployed or not knowing what to do with myself. December 26, Saturday. The frost has a beautiful appearance everywhere. Everything is thickly covered with it. It has occasioned us a very melancholy loss. Poor Jack was found this morning frozen to death on a flower bed before the dining-room windows. He had always continued to live in the Laurels and refused to go into his little wooden house. His broken wing rendered him helpless, so that it is no great wonder that he died, nor perhaps should we regret it much, for he has never been happy since his wing was last cut. I think it is not improbable that he was seized with a fit, and no one being at hand to give him medicine and take him in, he perished. That's really sad. That's really sad. They should have taken care of that poor bird. December 31st, Thursday. Here we are at the end of 1835, and now more than half the time for which Papa took Woodbury is expired. Every successive year now becomes more interesting with reference to our future prospects, which are totally unfixed. When our lease is out at the end of 1837, I wonder where our abode will be, for I think it very unlikely that we shall renew our lease. Whether we shall in the course of 1838 be settled near Cape Town, or in Van Diemen's Land, or in Canada, or whether we shall still be dwelling within the bounds of Great Britain, is altogether uncertain. Wherever it will be, I have one hope and one fear for the future. The hope that Papa, whose strength and health, alas, are breaking down, may not continue the business of a tutor. The fear that we shall be no longer all living together, for Richard is growing up, and both he and Mackworth may then be put out in some profession or line of business. And that brings us to the end of 1835. And when we come back for chapter 8, we will be embarking on the year 1836. And as we've seen here, she is now 17 years old.